All right, so get this. Imagine a world leader, like with the most brilliant strategic mind, asking a philosopher, what is a good life?
Hmm, interesting.
That's what we're diving into today, your deep dive on Aristotle. We're talking about a guy who wasn't just like pondering life's big questions. He was shaping the mind of a future conqueror, Alexander the Great.
It's true. It's really quite remarkable.
It makes you wonder, what kind of conversations did they have? And how did those conversations shape both of their destinies? Now, I know philosophy can sometimes feel like, a heavy lift.
Right.
But trust me, we're going to break down Aristotle's big ideas into like brain-boosting nuggets of wisdom.
I like it.
Get ready for some serious aha moments.
What's really fascinating about Aristotle is that he wasn't, how should I put it, some ivory tower philosopher.
Right.
His ideas had real-world impact, shaping everything from science and politics to, like, how we understand the very nature of reality.
And to think, it all started over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece.
Yeah, that's right, 384 BC.
This wasn't some bustling intellectual hub we're picturing. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagira, so not exactly known for its philosophical hotspots.
Well, and yet this seemingly ordinary beginning gives us a clue into Aristotle's extraordinary mind. His father was a physician,
Okay.
which likely had a huge impact on young Aristotle's way of thinking.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Medicine is all about observation, carefully examining the world to understand how things work. Sounds like that early exposure to his father's work left a lasting impression.
Absolutely, yeah. Fast forward a bit, and we find Aristotle at Plato's Academy in Athens, soaking up knowledge in, like, the most prestigious intellectual center of the time. He spent 2 decades there. But here's where things get interesting. Aristotle wasn't afraid to disagree with Plato.
Oh.
In fact, he challenged some of Plato's most fundamental ideas.
Interesting. And this independent thinking is what ultimately led him to become the tutor of Alexander the Great. Talk about a power move.
It's true, yeah.
Imagine the influence Aristotle must have had shaping the mind of a future emperor.
It really makes you wonder how their conversations might have unfolded. A philosopher teaching a future conqueror. Did Aristotle's emphasis on, reason and virtue temper Alexander's ambition?
Yeah.
It's a tantalizing thought, but influence aside, it's what Aristotle did after his time with Alexander that cemented his place in history. He founded his own school, the Lyceum. And this is where his unique approach to knowledge, known as empiricism, truly flourished.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of empiricism. It sounds kind of, technical, but it's actually a really important concept that's central to how we learn and understand the world, even today.
Yeah, at its core, empiricism is about grounding knowledge in what we can observe in the natural world.
Okay.
And it's about rolled up your sleeves, gathering data, and drawing conclusions based on evidence. This was a radical departure from Plato's ideas, who believed that true knowledge existed in a realm of abstract forms, separate from the physical world.
So while Plato was looking up to the heavens for answers, Aristotle was looking around at the world around him.
Exactly. Aristotle was all about getting his hands dirty, studying the world through observation and experience.
I like that.
This approach, as you can imagine, had a profound impact on the development of the scientific method.
It's like he was saying, don't just take my word for it, go out and see for yourself. And that's still how we learn today, right?
Yeah.
From conducting experiments in labs to simply observing patterns in our daily lives, it's all about gathering data and drawing conclusions.
You got it. But Aristotle didn't just observe, he took it a step further. He was obsessed with categorization, with bringing order to the chaos of the natural world. His writings cover everything from zoology and botany to ethics, physics, and logic. The scope of his work is, it's really quite mind-boggling.
Talk about a Renaissance man. Or should I say a pre-Renaissance man. This guy was the OG polymath. And speaking of logic, we can't forget Aristotle's biggest claim to fame, the syllogism. Now, I know that word might sound a little intimidating.
Don't worry. It's not as complicated as it sounds. The syllogism is just a fancy word for, a specific type of logical argument, one that Aristotle identified and formalized. It's made up of 3 parts: a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion that follows logically from those premises.
And it's, as you know, it's something we use all the time without even realizing it. Like, imagine you're trying to convince your friend to get a cat. You might say, all cats are fluffy and cuddly. That's your major premise. A general statement about cats. Then you might add, this kitten is a cat. That's your minor premise. A specific observation about the kitten in question. And therefore...
Therefore, you can conclude that this kitten is fluffy and cuddly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems so simple. But this seemingly basic structure revolutionized the way we think and argue. Aristotle gave us a framework for constructing sound arguments, for identifying fallacies, and for navigating the often murky waters of logic and reason.
It's a tool that's just as relevant today as it was back then,
Yeah.
especially in our age of, information overload.
Right.
Being able to critically analyze arguments and separate fact from fiction it's crucial. And Aristotle gave us the intellectual toolkit to do just that.
It's like he gave us a superpower, the power of logical reasoning. But where Aristotle really went head to head with his mentor, Plato, was in their view of reality itself.
Right. This is where things get really interesting. Plato, as you know, believed in a separate realm of perfect forms.
Yeah.
Kind of like blueprints or ideals that exist outside of our physical world.
So, like, there's this perfect idea of a chair out there, and all the chairs we see in the physical world are just imperfect copies of that ideal form.
Exactly. But Aristotle wasn't dying it. He was more grounded in his thinking, believing that the essence of an object, its form, is inseparable from the object itself.
So instead of looking to some otherworldly realm for answers, he's saying the answers are right here in front of us in the objects themselves.
Exactly. And this is where his concept of hylomorphism comes in.
Hilo what now?
Hylomorphism. It's a mouthful, I know. But it's a really cool idea. Think of a sculptor shaping a block of marble. The marble itself, that's the matter.
Okay.
But the sculptor's vision, the form they impose on that matter, that's what makes it a statue.
Right.
For Aristotle, everything in existence has this matter-form duality.
So it's not just about the stuff something is made of, but also the way it's shaped, organized, and what it's meant to be.
You got it.
Yeah.
To understand anything fully, you need to understand both its matter, its physical stuff, and its form, its essence, its purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of separating the physical from the abstract, Aristotle's saying they're inseparable, two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And this idea, this emphasis on understanding both the what and the why of things is what led him to develop his famous four causes. But we'll dive into those a little bit later.
All right, we've been exploring how Aristotle viewed reality, and we've touched on his groundbreaking work in logic, but what does it all mean?
Right.
How do his ideas impact the way we live?
Right, that's a great question.
This is where his Nicomachean ethics come in.
What's fascinating here is that for Aristotle, ethics wasn't just about following rules or abstract principles. He wanted to understand how we live a truly good life, a life of flourishing.
You're talking about eudaimonia, right?
Yes.
That word always makes me think of ancient Greek statues, like they're radiating this kind of calm, fulfilling energy.
It's not just about feeling good, though. Eudaimonia is more about living virtuously, reaching your full potential through reasoned action. It's about finding your purpose and pursuing it with excellence.
Okay, so it's not just about fleeting pleasure or happiness, it's about a deeper sense of fulfillment.
Exactly. And Aristotle believed that virtue, which is key to achieving this eudaimonia, is all about balance. This is where his doctrine of the mean comes in.
Oh, this is the Goldilocks principle of ethics, right? And not too much, not too little, just the right amount.
You got it. Aristotle argued that virtues like courage, generosity, or justice are the mean between two extremes. Courage, for example, is the balance between recklessness and cowardice. Too much bravery is reckless, too little is cowardly.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where you're not afraid to take risks, but you're also not foolishly jumping into danger.
Exactly, and this applies to almost every aspect of life. Generosity is the mean between extravagance and stinginess. Honesty is the mean between lying and being brutally blunt. It's all about finding that sweet spot of balance.
Now, this concept of the mean might seem simple, but it's actually quite profound. It's not about rigid rules, it's about constant self-reflection and striving for balance.
It's a lifelong journey, really. And that's where the reasoned action comes in. We need to think critically about our choices and try to act in a way that aligns with our values.
Which is easier said than done, I know. But that's the beauty of Aristotle's ethics. He wasn't afraid to acknowledge the complexities of human nature, the fact that we all struggle to find balance.
Right, and he offered a framework, a set of tools to help us navigate those complexities. And that's what makes it so relevant today. In our fast-paced world filled with so many choices, Aristotle reminds us to slow down, to think critically about our values, and to strive for a life of balance and fulfillment.
This is great, but we can't forget about Aristotle's views on politics, which are as complex and fascinating as his ethics.
That's right. Aristotle believed that human beings are fundamentally social creatures, that we thrive best in communities. But that didn't mean we were naturally good or inherently cooperative. He was aware of the dangers of power, of human weakness.
Which is why he was so careful about how he classified different forms of government.
Absolutely. He looked at three main forms: monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. He acknowledged that each had its strengths and weaknesses.
So a monarchy ruled by one can be good if the ruler is wise and benevolent, but it can also become a tyranny.
Correct. An aristocracy ruled by the few can be good if those few are virtuous and dedicated to the common good. But it can also degenerate into an oligarchy where the wealthy elite control everything.
And then we have democracy ruled by the many. This can be good if it fosters participation and protects individual rights. But it can also turn into mob rule, where the majority's will reigns supreme, even if it's not necessarily just. This all makes sense, but how do we actually avoid these pitfalls?
That's where Aristotle's idea of a polity comes in. He believed the best form of government was a mix of democracy and aristocracy, a system that balances the interests of the many with the wisdom of the few.
So basically a government that's not too centralized, not too chaotic.
Exactly. And Aristotle's emphasis on balancing power is something we grapple with even today.
Which leads us to another crucial aspect of Aristotle's work, his scientific legacy.
Right. Aristotle was a keen observer of the natural world. He classified animals, studied plant life, and even attempted to explain the workings of the universe.
While not all of his scientific theories held up to modern scrutiny, his approach to observation and categorization paved the way for modern science.
Absolutely. He emphasized the importance of gathering data, testing hypotheses, and building knowledge through empirical evidence.
Which is why he's considered a true pioneer in the scientific method, even if his theories about the geocentric universe were later proven wrong.
You're right, not everything he theorized about held up, but his influence on the development of science is undeniable.
And that brings us to the end of our second dive into Aristotle's vast world of knowledge. Next time, we'll explore his lasting impact on history, how his ideas influenced the development of Western thought, and what they might tell us about our world today. Okay, so we've spent this episode getting our minds blown wide open by Aristotle's ideas about reality, logic, ethics, politics, you name it. But here's the real kicker. His influence didn't end in ancient Greece.
Right.
It's like his thinking had these ripple effects that went out and shaped Western thought for centuries.
What's truly amazing is how Aristotle's works bridge the gap between ancient thought and the Middle Ages.
Okay.
His ideas became foundational for both Christian scholasticism and the Islamic philosophy. Talk about a lasting legacy.
Okay, those are some seriously big league terms. Now, you know I love a good history lesson, but for those of us who didn't major in philosophy, can you break down how Aristotle influenced these different schools of thought?
Let's start with scholasticism. During the Middle Ages in Europe, there was this huge movement among scholars to try and reconcile faith and reason. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, a major figure in Catholic theology, were grappling with how to make sense of Christian beliefs through the lens of logic and reason.
So they're looking back to ancient Greece for guidance, and bam, they rediscover Aristotle.
Exactly. Aquinas and other scholastics were blown away by Aristotle's emphasis on logic, his systematic approach to understanding the natural world, and his ideas about ethics and virtue. They saw in Aristotle a way to build a bridge between their faith and their intellect.
So it's not just dusty old scrolls gathering dust in some monastery library. Aristotle's ideas are now being used to understand God and the universe.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. At the very same time, over in the Islamic Golden Age, scholars and philosophers were experiencing their own Aristotle renaissance. Figures like Averroes, a prominent Islamic philosopher living in Spain, were poring over translations of Aristotle's works.
Hold on, so while Europe is in the thick of the Middle Ages, there's this explosion of knowledge happening in the Islamic world. Tell me more about this Islamic Golden Age.
It's a period in history that doesn't get enough attention. From roughly the 8th to the 13th centuries, while much of Europe was in a period of relative intellectual stagnation, the Islamic world was flourishing. We're talking major advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature, you name it.
And Aristotle's work is right there in the mix of it all, influencing this incredible blossoming of knowledge. It really shows how his ideas transcended cultural and religious boundaries, inspiring minds across time and geography.
Absolutely. Averroes, for example, became known for his detailed commentaries on Aristotle. He saw Aristotle's emphasis on reason and observation as not only compatible with Islam, but essential for a deeper understanding of the faith.
So we've got Aristotle's influence shaping both Christian and Islamic thought during the Middle Ages. That's mind-blowing.
And it didn't stop there. Fast forward a few centuries, and Aristotle's ideas are still a driving force during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment periods, marked by a renewed interest in classical thought and a push to understand the world through reason and observation.
It's like Aristotle planted these intellectual seeds back in ancient Greece, and they kept sprouting up in new and unexpected ways throughout history. But here's the million-dollar question. Are his ideas still relevant today? I mean, we're talking about a guy who lived over 2,000 years ago.
That's what's so amazing they are. Aristotle's approach to logic, his emphasis on critical thinking, on building sound arguments, on questioning assumptions, these are skills that are just as vital today as they've ever been, maybe even more so.
Especially in the age of the internet, right? I mean, we're bombarded with information from all sides. Social media, news, opinions flying at us a million miles an hour. Knowing how to sift through all that, how to separate fact from fiction, how to construct a logical argument, those are survival skills in the digital age.
And it's not just about logic. Aristotle's ethics, his ideas about virtue, balance, and living a fulfilling life, those resonate deeply in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain.
It's like he's giving us a roadmap for navigating the complexities of life, reminding us that true happiness isn't about chasing fleeting pleasures, but about cultivating virtue and striving to be our best selves.
It makes you wonder what Aristotle would make of our hyper-connected, technology-driven world. Would he be fascinated by our advancements in science and technology? Or would he be concerned about the potential impact of these advancements on our humanity, on our ability to connect with each other, to live meaningful lives?
Those are some heavy questions. But I think that's the beauty of engaging with Aristotle's work, even after all these centuries. It's not just about memorizing his ideas, it's about letting them spark our own curiosity, our own sense of wonder about the world, and our place in it.
Exactly. Aristotle reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom is a lifelong journey, one that requires us to be curious, to question, and to never stop seeking deeper understanding.
And on that note, we're going to have to wrap up our deep dive into the incredible mind of Aristotle. But this is just the beginning. I encourage you to pick up his work, explore his ideas, and see what sparks your own intellectual journey.
As Aristotle himself might say, the unexamined life is not worth living. So keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of ideas.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.